Welcome to Garage Gym Athlete Cool Downs. These episodes are short, actionable podcasts pulled from previous interviews and content we've been publishing for the last several years. So go for a walk, hop on the rower, or clip into the bike for this cool down episode. I think that's huge. And one question I have for you, having done all the research for the book and written it, do you think that everyone has a passion?
So I think that everyone can cultivate a passion, and that's a sacred cow that I slay in the book. So this notion that you find your passion is total bullshit. Very, very rarely does someone just stumble into something and immediately love it. Passion actually is developed and cultivated over time. So much better than thinking about, I need to find a passion, is actually to follow the things that interest you and invest time in what interests you and follow those interests. And then eventually they'll blossom into passions if it's the right fit for you. And this sounds kind of trivial, but I actually think it's real important because, again, the cultural wisdom says find your passion. So if the bar is that high and you try something and you don't immediately love it, you're like, oh, this must not be my passion, so I'm going to move on to the next thing. Whereas if you follow something and you're like, this is pretty interesting. I wouldn't expect to be passionate about something after a week, after a month, even after a year. I wasn't passionate about writing after a year. Writing's really hard. But it's this process of continually cultivating an interest that can lead to passion.
And so tell me where this book came from, jumping from peak performance to passion paradox.
So I wrote the book, I guess, for two reasons. The first is that all the world-class performers that I interviewed for peak performance, they were all super passionate, but they didn't talk about passion as just being this positive force. They talked about having a very complicated relationship with their passion. They talked about marriages having struggles. They talked about wishing that they were a better parent. They talked about retirement being so challenging. And that's when I started thinking that, wow, really caring about something is both a blessing, but it can also be a curse. It's really hard to be passionate and to care deeply about something. And then I started looking at myself and in my emerging passion as a writer. And I started thinking, wow, there are times when I should be present for my wife and I'm not, because I'm thinking about the fifth paragraph of the story that I'm editing. Or there are times when I should be able to turn off and practice what I preach and go on a hike. But even if I don't bring the device with me, my mind is still chewing over these ideas. And on the one hand, you could say how fortunate I am to have a career that I love. On the other hand, I could say, wow, I'm not enjoying nature and I'm not present with my wife. So I wanted to try to get ahead of some of the destructive forces and try to figure out how I could better practice passion in a way that I could learn how to choose when to really be all in, but also step out and be present for other things. And it's an ongoing practice. That's a huge theme in the book, is that passion isn't this one-time thing. It's a practice that you have to keep on coming back to, keep on nourishing, keep on nurturing. Otherwise, the inertia of it can just completely take over your life. By the time you realize what happened, it's too late.
I guess marriage would just be you mentioned that, but just a good metaphor for passion in general. That marriage isn't always perfect. You guys will get people getting disagreements, and there are good times, bad times, and it takes a lot of work to forge a good relationship, and you have to be on point with that. Would you say that's a fair statement, that that's how any passion is going to be, whatever you're cultivating and whatever that might be?
Yeah, you're a super smart dude. So in the beginning of the book, I introduced passion by going back to the roots of the word. And before, passion meant following an activity that you love. It was completely used in the romantic sense. And then what's even more interesting is that the research on love shows that love very rarely happens at the first sight. And it's actually a huge problem in the millennial generation right now. Researchers find that people expect love at the first sight, and if things aren't perfect right away, they move on, and people aren't finding love. If you have what's called a growth mindset towards love, and you believe that love is something to be cultivated over time, you're much likely to find yourself in a long-term relationship and have greater life satisfaction. So the research on love completely mirrors the research on passion. So you are spot on. And again, it makes total sense, right? Like these things that you really care about, they're complicated. And if you don't come back to them over and over again and make them a practice, an ongoing practice, then they can very easily spiral out of, they can very easily spiral out of control.
Thanks for listening to today's Cool Down. If for some ridiculous reason you are not subscribed to Garage Gym Athlete Programming, fix that problem right now. Go to GarageGymAthlete.com, sign up for a free trial, get started with us today. Thanks for listening.